Before the break, we discussed the conditions for there to be an authentic problem. Now, you also mentioned that questions that guide the learners too much may not be good. Why is that?
It's not that they're not good. It's just that in a learning situation, we have a great opportunity to observe not only if students can obey or follow steps, but most importantly, if they understand why they are doing them. You see, in life, we're constantly dealing with new situations without having the user's guide for any of them. And yet we manage. How do we do it? Well, by thinking on our own.
Okay, so how do we get students to think on their own?
Well, open-ended questions seem quite practical to do this because they let students explore different solutions. Oh, and when I say open-ended questions, I mean real questions where students can really give different answers and not the fake choice questions such as, do you want boiled or cooked carrots? Tasks, questions, or challenges that ask students to analyze, evaluate, or create are much more engaging and help hit that open-ended target. For the learning situation to make sense for the students, there must be a fluid line of questioning between the problem, the final production, and the proposed task. The connection between the end-of-course outcomes, what the student must learn, and what they need to realize their final production should be obvious to them.
And what exactly is the final production?
The final production is basically the goal, what is expected of students. In other words, it's the thread that keeps the LES together and gives us a reason to do it, if you will. Again, when do we engage in a series of tasks? Well, when we think that they'll be useful to us to get to our goal, right? Well, this is why we think that the final production needs to be clearly stated right at the beginning of the LES. Our bet is that if students know where you want to take them, chances are the task that you will propose to help them get there will make more sense to them. Now, getting back to the goal. The goal could be something that needs planning, like buying a house or trip, or even going back to school. But it could also be something spontaneous, such as car trouble, an insurance claim, or a complaint to a noisy neighbor.
This is all very interesting, but can you really get students to that point with just one LES? To be quite honest, I'm a bit skeptical.
I'd be skeptical too. It's normal that students may need help, especially when they start off. What's important here is to understand that competency development is the end result of a learning process that includes a variety of learning tools. Ideally, the expected level of autonomy increases gradually from one LES to the next. If the student needs to build or solidify certain elements of knowledge, the process may be punctuated at times by certain exercises or activities. Metacognition is also an essential part of this process.
If I remember correctly, you mentioned meaningful metacognition earlier on. What did you mean by that?
Metacognition is what helps students become aware of how far they've come and how much they've learned. It's almost like taking a before, during, and after picture. For example, before starting the LES, we can question students on what they understand of the problem, what they think they need to do, and how they want to plan their work. During the LES, we can set aside specific times when we encourage students to stop and think about the efficiency of their strategies in order to change or modify them if needed. For example, before you go any further, discuss the following points with your teacher. After the LES is completed, we encourage students to take stock of their learning and of their learning process. Here, students should answer questions that jumpstart their thought process. This may take on different forms or shapes. It could, for example, be written, or it could be an interview with the teacher. Whatever works best, as long as there is a way to keep track and record their progress.
It's funny. Our stage assistant recently went back to school, and during the break, she was telling us how she considers those types of questions to be a total waste of time.
Unfortunately, she's not the only one with that perception. I think that those questions could be more relevant if we adapted each question to the student in front of us. Our goal here is to help them understand what works best for them. For those of you who want to write an LES, one way that seems to work well is to include some of these questions only in the teacher's guide and not systematically ask generic type questions in the student booklet. This gives the teacher the liberty to choose the appropriate question or questions for each student. Helping students develop their metacognitive skills, getting them to think before and after they act, should give them a better chance to adapt and integrate what they learn to new situations.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, when the LES is well put together, the teacher is more like a guide that shares ideas and advice, but lets you struggle a bit with the challenge. They ask relevant questions, make sure all of the necessary resources are available to you, keep you on track, and offer help if and when you need it. Then the guide lets you choose how you will get to your destination. Lastly, to help our students become more and more competent, we expose them to a variety of LESs that increasingly demand them to be more and more autonomous. Anything to add, Ms. Alex?
As a recap, authentic problem, open questions, and meaningful metacognition.
Thank you for sharing your ideas on How Can I? And to all of you watching, we hope that this will inspire you to put your great ideas into action.